Today we welcome some of the voices in our new best-selling book, Tap Into Your Best Life. Their chapters reveal how EFT tapping, emotional freedom techniques, and advanced protocols can change, heal, or transform your life. The book is divided into 4 parts: body, mind, heart, and soul. Our first guest is Vivien Hsu, and she's going to tell us how the body can be improved with EFT. Welcome, Viv. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Viv, because you represent the credentialed medical establishment in many ways, and how you have introduced EFT tapping to that world. And it all began, I believe, with your own personal story. So first tell us who you are and how your story began with EFT.
So I am a university lecturer. I lecture in undergrad and postgrad in medical establishments. My story was that I underwent 2 surgeries and then I had a lot of pain. I was not able to sleep despite taking the medication. And the irony was I specialize in pain management and I could not manage my own pain. So out of my desperation, I remember way back when I studied Chinese medicine, EFT was briefly mentioned. And because I studied Chinese medicine and psychology, I thought, why not give it a try? And to my astonishment, just 1 hour tapping, I just found something online. At the time, I wasn't credentialed or anything, and I'll just do it. And then that night was the first night I went from 2 hours sleep to 6 hours. And I wake up refreshed, and I was like, oh my God, I got to try this. At first, I was like, it's probably a fluke. And I tried the next few nights, and every single night I had 6 hours sleep. That I decided that I'm going to be certified as EFT practitioner, so I can use that for my patients as well. And as I was researching that, I discovered Professor Peter Stapleton's work. That's why I went to get certified with her organization. And I've been using her research as well to convince the doctors and patients. And for the ones that are not convinced, at least they've got some evidence they can see, because in the medical world, everything has been evidence-based, and that's why I've been using things.
Fantastic. Because in your bio, in the book, you talk about having a reach to over 300 doctors in Brisbane, and as a clinical pharmacist and a credentialed diabetes educator, that you put out to those people how a holistic approach can dovetail in with the medical, correct? This is why people are welcoming the research by like Dr. Peter Stapleton, because then it gives you a way to actually prove how the science is approaching EFT. So tell us, I know you have quite a few stories, which when you deal with people with diabetes or PCOS, I believe that some of them lose weight dramatically. And in the case of one of your female clients, she actually fell pregnant. She had PCOS. But tell us about the one you called John, who's happy to share his details. What was your experience with him?
What happens is he's a CEO with a lot of privilege. He's literally got a whole team himself. He's got a psychologist, a dietitian, a personal chef that cooks what the dietitian organized. He has a personal trainer. He has a masseur. He has even on-site sauna, you name it. He's got everything and everyone that you would ideally want to have. But what happens is his number, despite best efforts, is still not moving because nobody is looking at the root cause or the contributor that's pushing the sugar level up.
John came to you with type 2 diabetes and it was getting worse.
Yes.
Despite he had the wealth to have every expert. How did you approach him and how did he accept the results he was getting?
Well, to be honest, he was my most skeptical patient. He came in our list to say, I talk to a psychologist every week. I don't know what else you can do for me, but since I've been referred to you by 2 of my specialists, I better come. And I look at his profile, I'm like, you have done everything already. So the only one thing that you haven't done is tapping. And he was actually like, what's that? And when I explained to him, I was like, nah, that's ridiculous. So what I did from my training, I just start tapping on myself and going, this is ridiculous. Why am I wasting my time sitting? Because I can just tell he was very like, ugh. such a waste of time, that face. And funny enough, after 5 minutes in, he farted so loud and he was embarrassed and he was starting to get angry. And I just keep on going at it. And then after 5 minutes, he just burst out crying. His tears just came down. He says, "What have you done to me?" I'm like, this is your body responding. It's okay. That's good. And I just keep on going. So basically for that half an hour consult, we had very little talking. It was basically me doing the tapping in front of him. He was feeling embarrassed about farting and crying. He calmed down. He says, "Oh my God, this is the most relaxed I've felt in years."
From on, in the weeks that followed, you gave him some tapping protocols. Is that correct, as you describe in your chapter? And now tell us exactly how his life has changed.
Now, at first, he was quite resistant to do tapping every day. And also, he's been doing it for good 6 months now. Whenever he doesn't tap, his sugar level goes up.
Really?
And whenever he does do the tapping that I asked him to do, his sugar stays at the perfect range that the doctor wants him to be. So that way, the best thing is we did not even focus on weight reduction for him because it was the urgency was to reduce his sugar level. And by doing tapping alongside everything else that he's already doing, and quite happens, his sugar level improved dramatically because he's not so stressed anymore. But we also clear some of the childhood traumas for him. And being a CEO, that's a very high stress job, and as well as a little bit of family issues and stuff. So the best thing he said to me, apart from the fact that we were able to reduce the injections that he needs to use. Now he's off all insulins and injections. He's only taking 2 oral tablets. Better relationship with the family. The best thing was, and also unintentionally 10 kilos weight reduction. But the best thing was, this is his exact word. He says, "Babe, thank you for giving my life back."
Wow, okay. So there you have the holistic approach alongside the medical protocols, which I think is very important to stress. And a big part of it is not just the physical tapping, it's what unearths in the body, correct? The childhood issues, which it helps talking to a therapist who's trained to understand that and then to move forward. So Viv, this is fantastic. How has telling this story and being in a global bestseller changed your own life when it comes to putting yourself out there? You're already very well known. Has it helped you to be in the book?
I am very grateful for the opportunity to share, and also very grateful to my patients that's willing for me to share their story. So now that book is my best evidence to take it to all any skeptical referring doctors or patients that say, "Look, have a read. There are other stories in there." You can see the evidence that not only what I'm saying is everybody else, and we are trying to get this out to more people so people can get access and benefit from this, the miracle.
Yeah. If there was one thing you would like our listeners to take away about your story and about how EFT has changed your own life and can change your patients' lives, what would the one thing be you tell your listeners?
So number one thing is I say to the patients that your body is not the enemy. It's only a messenger. Stop fighting your body. And by using tapping, it helps them to start listening to the body. And those 2 patients are actually represent 80% of my patients. I've seen thousands and thousands of them. It helps them to reduce their shame and guilt. It helps them to increase their self-love and self-care, and also help them not to worry about the social stigma out there anymore and really focus on themselves.
That's great. And so where can people get hold of you? I know you're based in Australia, but I'm sure you help people all over the world. How can people contact you?
Anyone who's interested can visit my website, vipdiabetes.com.au, or they can send an email to the support. Our website has contact details on there.
Okay, I will put that in the podcast notes so they'll be able to contact you. Thank you so much, Viv. It's been wonderful to have you along with the other Australians and, of course, with Dr. Peter Stapleton supporting you personally. I know you've met her.
Twice in person. We're both on Gold Coast.
So thank you. It's great to have the Australian input. That's the kind of story that people reading the book can actually hear the person. Now let me introduce you to Penny Croal, a pioneering trauma specialist and founder of International Metaconsciousness Academy. Now, Penny, you've been working with people from all over the world with chronic illness. Tell us more about your own story, how you discovered EFT.
Um, it's quite interesting. I see this reflected in so many of my clients, the way that I came in to EFT, because I was at the bottom of the well, really, of my life. And that bottom of the well, when you get to the bottom of it, and I was diagnosed with manic depression, which is now called bipolar. I had a broken foot, a trapped nerve in my shoulder, and Bell's palsy. So I was really quite in despair until I chose to go for a massage and was introduced, funnily enough, by an Australian tapper to EFT. And at that point, I thought, what have I got to lose? I would have probably danced naked around a fire at that time because my life was so at its lowest. And this is what happens with so many of us, isn't it? When we make that choice point, when we cannot get any lower in our lives, there is that little faint glimmer of light. And so I started tapping, and my face went back to it's not normal, my face, it'll never be normal, but it went back to what it is now. And I thought there's something in this weird little thing that you look like Laurel and Hardy. So I went on several courses and spent quite a lot of money until I was led to Carl Dawson, the creator of matrix reimprinting. So that's how I got into it. And so many of my clients get into it because they've been sitting in a chemo ward, or they've been in a hospital and somebody has said, have you tried EFT? Have you spoken to Penny? There's nothing, I don't advertise a lot, but this is how the world works, isn't it? By that recommendation, by somebody saying one thing, I've tried this. Have you tried it? So that's been 20 odd years ago. I didn't realize, I never wanted to be a practitioner. I didn't ever think that I would be on the trajectory of assisting so many and giving that opportunity of light to so many people across the world. I specialize in trauma, and for me, that trauma means that whenever we've had an emotional conflict in this life, in the womb, or generational, what is now called epigenetics, that if we don't clear that ourselves, it will express ourselves either physically, like myself, with all of the things, and like many of my clients with cancer, with diabetes, with lupus, with all these chronic diseases that are out there, or it will express itself in a behavioral way, and that is by mental health.
How would you describe your best life now versus then?
What was really interesting, I think, that prior to the despair, I didn't think that there was much wrong with my life. I thought everybody lived like I lived, with that manic, with the crashes, and I thought that I just had to cope with it. Until I started off with counselors and went to psychotherapists and then went to psychiatrists until they actually diagnosed me with manic depressive. I had never even heard of that. I just thought this was life. So really, to compare myself now, I can help so many other people now as well to see that there is nothing that we need to fix in our bodies. There's nothing broken in our bodies. We do not need to cope or manage. That whole myth of coping and managing, and we can actually release it and be the person we were born to be.
How do you bring together EFT, matrix reimprinting, and metaconsciousness?
So, metaconsciousness, meta from the Greek word being overview or the bigger picture. And for me, you cannot do one without another. So, metaconsciousness, we look at the brain, embryological, the biology, the reasons that cells adapt. So, from my philosophy, is the body isn't making a mistake. The body is simply adapting to survive. But because we're human beings, we get trapped in these stories and give meanings, and we are on that hamster wheel of despair until we get to the bottom of the well. Meta gives us the modalities to look at building up the window of resilience before we find the conflicts so that people don't have to be just pushed into the deep end of the swimming pool or go further down the well. And when we start to disentangle all of the person's themes, their biases, their beliefs, then we start to release these conflicts with tapping, with matrix reimprinting, which personally, after studying many modalities, is one of the most gentlest ways of finding that root cause and going back. And we don't always have to go back, but finding that part of us that is still trapped with that trauma. And that part could be a protector, or that part could be it's thinking it's doing its best for you, but it's just trapped in that time. And of course, our unconscious doesn't have a time clock. So our unconscious doesn't know whether we've had a trauma down through the generations or in the womb or when it was yesterday. It doesn't care about that. It's endeavoring to keep us in that survival mode. And sometimes that survival mode will keep us in the loop of the diabetes, the ME, even the cancer. So yes, it's just interweaving and disentangling these fairy lights that have been in the attic for so long.
What is the one thing you tell someone listening to this and reading our book, Tap Into Your Best Life, your story? How would you advise them?
I think just to even tap, you don't even have to start any kind of scripts. I'm a bit anti-script actually, but just tapping on your fingers. But if you have mental health, I think we need to be witnessed. And part of all of the us as practitioners to hold the person and witness and validate and acknowledge, because sometimes the client, and I know I was, but so many of my clients are trapped in that shame and guilt and caught up in their own forest of thoughts.
Isolation comes to mind. Because we know that when a trauma happens, that Uden moment, you can describe it. At the time something hits us, it's unexpected, dramatic.
There's 4 points to any kind of survival program.
Yeah.
And,
So, okay, what are they?
and when that moment comes along, and we can be on any dimension of having a great life or just being very low vitality, and that Uden moment, that unexpected moment that startles us, that's shocking, it's quite dramatic. It doesn't have to be a big car crash or a plane hitting your house. It can be that moment that your boss says, shut up in a board meeting, that we feel isolated because as mammals, we are community creatures. And so when we're thrown out of, or we perceive, and this is the critical thing, that doesn't actually have to be even in reality, it's our perception when we're thrown out of the tribe or we're feeling on our own, that isolation. And then no strategy. So many of my clients have faced bigger fears than the Uden moments, but they've had a strategy to get out of that. But if we don't have that strategy and we can't get out of it, then we're trapped. And then we get stuck on that tracks and triggers. So something else can come along that reminds us, the smell, we've heard something, we touch something that recreates that.
I think that's answered the question why we would consult someone to help us feel not only safe, but witness us something where we didn't have help, where we were isolated and alone. But on the other hand, gentle or regular tapping on ourselves can, just in the moment and in our lives, regulate us. We can all agree it regulates our nervous system.
I think also the reason I really invite people to sit with a practitioner is that tapping is so wonderful, but sometimes it can bring up a lot of energy. And some people can get scared when that energy rises. So being with another person to co-regulate. I mean, Stephen Porges has done countless studies on this about co-regulation. And so tapping on our own can start that to help us navigate, but tapping with somebody and tapping in groups. And there's so many groups around the world now. And finding a practitioner that you trust and working with that practitioner, because so many of my clients haven't been able to trust their own bodies.
That brings us back to the title of your chapter, which is The Messenger Within, listening to the body. And I think that's what it all comes down to, that we can stop the judgment and the fear. Someone like you and hear the story in the book, they realize that there's another way that's possible for them.
And I think a lot of people I've listened to over 20 years are slightly scared to look at our emotions because they think that there's a can of worms in their brain. And if they start opening that, what else is going to come out? And my takeaway is that can of worms is already open. And if we don't look at that, it will express itself in the body or by mental behavior.
Yeah.
Because I talk about bipolar, I think the main takeaway also is that there's still so much stigma around mental health, and there's still so much shame and guilt that we can come together and heal ourselves.
Yeah. So I think that's a good way to end. Where can people get hold of you?
So people can get hold of me at .info, IMCA, imca.info. Penny at Change Ahead. I'm founder of 2 companies, and you can Google me. I'm the only Penny Croal in the world, sadly.
Thank you. Next up, we meet Janice Thompson, and her chapter is Transforming Grief and Loss into Meaning, Joy, and Hope. Janice Thompson specializes in grief, loss, and major life transitions. She's the author of the book, Joy Beyond Belief, From Grief and Loss to Joy and Hope, is the way she approaches this topic. So welcome, Janice, and tell us about the moment in your life which shattered everything and brought you to doing the work you do today.
Thank you. Yes, I come into the work that I do from my own massively traumatic and sudden loss. Just a normal day for me. I used to work as a personal trainer, had my own business. I was married, 2 children, young children, and my youngest daughter come running in and said, Daddy's collapsed. So as usual, I thought that's a bit of a joke on his part. So I went running outside, but very quickly I realized it was something far more serious. And from then on, panic, pandemonium, it was absolutely chaos. Ringing an ambulance, asking my eldest daughter to run next door to bring people round to try and help us. It seemed a lifetime that the ambulance took to get there. I tried to do my own resuscitation on my husband, which was also really traumatic at the time and afterwards as well. My 2 daughters running around, 2 dogs running around. And he'd just had a massive heart attack by the time the ambulance had got there. He'd really died. And from then on in, it was absolutely a sudden, traumatic, massive shock. It went on for months, years, really. And it was like 3 people in major shock and trauma. Me, my daughter was 8 and my daughter was 14. And it was just emotional pain, just absolute, really at the bottom of a pit feeling. It was physical aching, not being able to sleep, trying to run my life and work out my finances. All of a sudden I'm on my own and I've got to sort that out. Going into school, sorting out all the normal daily things. Cooking, trying to cook was a trauma in itself. It was just absolutely, I would describe as hell. It was so difficult and so excruciating painful that I was a mother and I was supposed to make things right for my daughters. As a mother, you're supposed to look after your children, and I felt I couldn't do that. Not only because of my own suffering, but because they'd lost their dad and I could not put that. It went on for a long time. It was grief on top of grief that hadn't been resolved, complicated.
So stop and tell us about that. So when we have a triggering moment, which obviously shattered your life, that's all we can think about is the cause of our pain, that we're walking around traumatized by that one thing. As you discovered when you met Carl Dawson and trained in EFT and matrix reimprinting, this can have an earlier memory. It's unhealed earlier trauma. So tell us about how you realized that this was not only losing your husband, but something more was underneath.
Absolutely. And it's so often with grief as well. I found out with many of my clients since. I'd lost my father when I was 14 years old, and that just had not been dealt with in any way whatsoever. And I just went into survival mode and just carried on and tried to get through life as best I could. But it wasn't really till after my husband died and subsequently meeting Carl Dawson and doing the wonderful EFT and matrix imprinting that I really put all those dots together and saw those connections on how, from the age of 14 when I lost my dad, the impact of grief had on my life. And so the power of EFT completely transformed everything, and in such a gentle, natural way, because grieving is a natural process. But unfortunately, the majority of us get stuck in it because of other things that are going on, because of social issues around grieving. 75% of people do not want to talk about grief and death. That's a lot of people, considering we're all going to die. So there's a lot of social stigma around it as well. So all those factors came into play. But grief is a natural process, and EFT is also, I believe, a really natural way to help people. So it was something that helped.
So before we move on to how your life then evolved, I almost want to stop here and say, what's the one thing you can tell the 75% of people who don't want to talk or think about grief when one of their friends or associates experiences it? What would you say is the best way for someone listening to this to help someone else as well who's experiencing grief instead of avoiding them?
It's really important to talk, and I really suggest 100% see an EFT practitioner. That really has got to be number one, because it will really help people to be able to open up, because so much grief is suppressed because in society we're not supposed to show it and stiff upper lip and carry on. But actually, by doing EFT and tapping, it really helps people to be able to express how they're feeling in a safe environment, in a safe way, and help them to really realize that things can be really different. People are suffering in silence, and that's what's so wonderful about this book, Tap Into Your Best Life, all the chapters, and particularly my chapter regarding grief, because it is really showing people when they read it that they can relate to it and understand, and they don't have to be suffering in silence, that actually there is a way that they can maneuver through it in a really healthy way.
And the point I'm making is that those who love them, who can't take away their grief, can maybe investigate tapping on themselves for that issue of not being able to help, and
Absolutely.
then maybe suggest it if they find a way, or read the chapter, give them some hope. Because let's talk about the hope. What has come out of that experience, training, releasing? What is your best life now?
Yeah, best life now, completely transformed. I've always been a passionate person about whatever I'm interested in. And really, once I realized how EFT helped change my life, I changed my career. I became an EFT practitioner and trainer. I got such a deeper spiritual connection, which I see with a lot of my clients, which I wasn't expecting, massively deep connection. And I've integrated my grief into my life. So now it has given me purpose. It has allowed me to help with my passion to help others that are grieving, and subsequently give people hope that actually they don't have to be suffering. They don't have to be in this excruciating either emotional or physical pain for all their lives. Grief can be something that can be really integrated into your life and transformed and become a purpose.
That's knowing you personally. I believe your daughter got married recently, and that feeling you had, that how can I bring up my children when I'm suffering so much grief? How has that helped you as a parent and move through to as they've grown up?
Massively, number one, because I tap with my daughters as well. So of course there's emotional times of the year and different events that occur, such as my daughter's wedding, which obviously was a beautifully happy event, tinged with sadness that the father couldn't give her away, obviously. But we talk, we tap, and she's just a different person from using tapping as well in her life, and so is my other daughter. And it has just changed me as a mother. They always send me beautiful Mother's Day cards telling me what an absolutely amazing mother I am, which is lovely to hear. I'm sure I could do other things as well, but I definitely turned my life around to what it could have been. I can 100% tell you that. And if anybody else is feeling in any similar way, there is hope, and there is certainly ways to maneuver through your grief, even though when you lose somebody, it feels like there's nothing that can bring them back, and that is not the truth. There's a lot of hope and a lot of transforming that pain from loneliness to connection, from heartbreak to purpose. So,
I like that. That's a wonderful way to end. Where can people get hold of you? Do you have a website?
people can get hold of me through my website, www.janicethompson.co.uk, or email me at hellojanicethompson.co.uk.
Thanks, Janice. And I see your coloured bottles behind there.
Yes.
Suggests that you bring colour into your work as well.
Absolutely, I do.
Thank you so much.
Thank
You have just met 3 of the amazing co-authors in our best-selling book, Tap Into Your Best Life, EFT Tapping Stories of Real-Life Transformation and Healing. Vivien Hsu comes from Australia, Penny Croal and Janice Thompson from the UK. Just 3 of the amazing co-authors in Tap Into Your Best Life. Buy the book now and read their amazing stories in full. If something in this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Because transformation begins when we stop being silent. Until next time, keep tapping, keep growing, and stepping into your best life.